Dr. Loomis himself had said that at times he felt as if something unseen, some supernatural force or entity was trying to get to him. And we're not talking about job fatigue. We're talking about the fact that by spending so much time around Michael that he felt like something was trying to get to him. This is the whole genesis of the idea that Michael was more than just a person, a human being, but was actually, there was something supernatural about him. And this, Dr. Loomis also realized, presented a certain danger, because if that idea got around, he feared that some people could start to worship Michael Myers as some sort of a god. And that's exactly what happened in the 1970s. We saw the emergence of a cult that basically worshipped him as such.
The cult of Thorn was made up mostly of residents of a town called Haddonfield, Illinois. And they were led by a man named Dr. Terrence Wynn. Now, Dr. Wynn was the director of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, which is where Michael spent 15 years as a patient. If you want to trace the history of the cult of Thorn, you'd have to go back hundreds of years to the original Druids of Gaul, Ireland. Now, the ancient Druids were a highly regarded, though mysterious, but highly respected group of people. We're talking about artists, doctors, philosophers. Really, they were the religious leaders of their day. They explored things like the duality of good and evil. And a small group of them spent most of their lives trying to understand and explain these concepts. Some of the methods they used became known as black magic or witchcraft. One of the theories that they came up with was that it was the universe itself, not God, not any other deity, but actually the universe that somehow held power over mankind. Now, if we fast forward a few hundred years, the Druids all but disappeared and broke down into small sects, those that survived. And one of these sects, they observed during their festival of Samhain, a constellation in the night sky. They would call this constellation Thorn, and they would adopt it as their symbol. They believed that this constellation was going to reappear. And when it did, it was going to bring death with it. It was going to bring flood, famine, plague, just good old-fashioned druidic death. But they came up with a way to stop it somehow. They thought that if they put a curse on one of their members, that he would get great power, and he would get great immortality, but he'd have to kill his entire family. And if he did that, then when the constellation reappeared, they wouldn't all die in the fiery flood. So our Thorn cult from Haddonfield, they believed that this child killer, Michael Myers, the kid who just killed his sister for no reason, they say, this must be our guy. He's the guy that's cursed with the curse of Thorn.
If you accept that there is a Jesus Christ that was created by an omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent being, you also have to accept that there could be someone like Michael Myers that was created by darkness and evil. Someone that has superhuman strength and that can defy death time and time again.
Terrence Wynn's family actually had roots in the original Thorn cult from hundreds of years ago. And they passed their ideologies down from generation to generation, finally down onto him. He had a young girl who started working as his secretary named Dawn Thompson. She was about 20 years old, so of course he indoctrinated her into his new formed cult of Thorn. Dawn actually managed to be one of the few survivors of Halloween night 1995. And she would later tell investigators that the sole reason that Terrence Wynn took the job at Smith's Grove was so that he could preside over Michael Myers.
During Dawn Thompson's interrogation of November 1995, she revealed that Terrence Wynn prevented Michael from being transferred to a maximum security facility, as was the request of Dr. Loomis, and that Wynn was the mastermind behind Michael's escape of October 30th, 1978. She stated that by doing this, Wynn believed that he was allowing Michael to fulfill his commitment to the Thorn curse by hunting down and killing the rest of his family.
So on Halloween 1989, several members of the Cult of Thorn participated in the abduction of a 9-year-old girl named Jamie Lloyd. Jamie Lloyd was the niece of Michael Myers, and as being such, she was held as being paramount in the cult's rituals and experiments. But it's important to understand, when I say rituals and experiments, what we're really talking about is a horrific series of mental, physical, and sexual abuse. Jamie Lloyd was held captive underneath the tunnels of Smith's Grove for over 6 years. When she was just 15 years old, she was impregnated. And we don't know at this point if she was artificially inseminated by some of the doctors or if she was raped. What we do know is that there were other girls who were patients at Smith Grove at the same time. They were also impregnated. Most of these girls, they suffered miscarriages due to the terrific stress they were under. But the ones that did give birth had their children taken away from them almost immediately.
Terrence Wynn and the Thorn cult pretty much had access to every patient at Smith's Grove. They preyed primarily on schizophrenics, people who couldn't defend themselves, and those who frankly wouldn't be believed even if they came forward with what they saw. These were people on the edge of society. They could have easily been written off as delusional or crazy insane.
Now on Halloween night 1995, Terrence Wynn himself now, with several members of his Thorn cult, participated in the abduction of a young lady named Kara Strode. She was also with her 8-year-old son Danny and a newborn baby named Stephen. Now this newborn baby is actually the son of Jamie Lloyd. Jamie Lloyd finally escaped the tunnels under Smith's Grove, only to be killed by Michael Myers later the same night. Now it didn't take long for Dr. Wynn and his cult, because they were so embedded within Haddonfield's community, that they just found Stephen right away. And their idea was they were going to take Stephen back to Smith's Grove and offer him up as a sacrifice, bringing Michael back to them. They thought, you know, when they sacrifice Stephen, it ends this curse, this 32-year burden he's been saddled with. Michael's going to be happy. Well, Michael did return to Smith's Grove that night, only it didn't really go the way they planned it.
Michael walked into the Smith's Grove Sanitarium and proceeded to murder almost every member of the cult with a surgical machete as they were getting ready to sacrifice Stephen Lloyd. He proved once and for all that there was no connection, that there was no celestial predetermination. The man they hailed as their savior from death ended up bringing them death.
One of the survivors of the 1995 Smith's Grove massacre was a young man named Daniel Vasher. Vasher's fate was sealed at an early age. Both his parents were lifelong cult members. Daniel was born in the cult, bred in the cult, and at a very early age, brainwashed by the cult. It was Halloween night, 1995, and Daniel was in the operating room videotaping the ceremonies when Michael broke in and began murdering everyone he came across. Both Daniel's parents were murdered by Michael in cold blood right in front of his eyes as he lay on the floor in shock and terror.
In the wake of the Smith's Grove massacre, the rest of the Cult of Thorn, the remaining members, would go into hiding. And it would be about 3 years until we saw or heard anything from Michael Myers again. This time he'd show up in Summer Glen, California around 1998. Also around the same time, we'd see the reemergence of the Cult of Thorn, only now they're known as the Thorn Syndicate, and they're led by a man named Daniel Vasher. Now the Thorn Syndicate is much larger and much more powerful than the Cult of Thorn was. And Daniel Vasher is much more psychotic and much more violent than Terrence Wynn ever was. I guess seeing his parents murdered right in front of him had a profound effect on Daniel Vasher. But rather than reform or turn his life around, his mind goes in the entirely opposite direction. And he starts to hold Michael Myers in an almost divine regard. He saw the act of Michael Myers murdering his parents and everyone that he knew as kind of a retaliatory act against the people that bastardized the true meaning of Michael's purpose. Michael Myers was not sent here to save some cult from death. Michael Myers is death, and he's working on behalf of the devil. Daniel Vasher has convinced himself and his followers that God has given up on this world. There's so much corruption, so much evil, that God has left the world in the hands of the devil. And Michael Myers' true purpose is to pave the way for Satan's arrival.
Daniel Vasher and his followers have been investigated by the FBI as early as 1999, and they've proved quite the adversaries to the Bureau. Vasher was very cunning and smart about who he recruited into his group. He targeted primarily the uber wealthy, people with access to military-grade weaponry, and he put together a world-class mastermind group of computer hackers. This was a very large, very sophisticated, well-funded group of people that had seemingly unlimited access to everything. They also were responsible for the murders of hundreds of people, as well as millions of dollars of damage to several governmental databases.
Daniel Vasher is every bit as intelligent, manipulative, and dangerous as some of the most infamous cult leaders in American history. He's on the same page as Charles Manson or Jim Jones or David Koresh. What sets him apart from that group is how advanced his syndicate actually is. They've managed to stay underground for well over a decade. They never meet in the same place twice. They move from state to state. And it's been reported they have an incredible arsenal of weapons at their disposal. We're talking about military-grade automatic weapons with members who are well trained on how to use them. They have money, they have resources, and they've managed to infiltrate law enforcement agencies at every level, all across the country.
The FBI was able to put an undercover agent within the Thorn Syndicate with the help of an insider informant. And this agent was able to produce the only known footage of Daniel Vasher.
We live in a world where complacency has become the norm. They believe anything that they're told simply because they feel they have to. They eat whatever is given to them and never even dare to entertain the idea of biting the hand of the person that's shoveling them table scraps. They blissfully drown in ignorance, never even realizing that the water is just overtaking their bodies and filling their lungs. But we are the exception. We are the unfortunate ones whose eyes have been opened and can see the world for what it truly is. A putrescent wasteland filled with the corrupt and their countless number of smiling minions. But my friends, I have been blessed with the ability to recognize the beauty of decay. In death, new life is bred. With their deaths, we will flourish in a world lit only by fire. And holding that torch will be the angel Michael.
When Vasher found out the identity of the undercover agent, he ordered his execution. And the body of that agent was found in his own home, bound to a chair, his throat slit ear to ear, and the thorn symbol carved into his chest. Likewise, when the informant's identity was coughed up, a 37-year-old woman named Rosa Nunez was found murdered in her own backyard in cold blood in broad daylight with her sister. And again, the perpetrators scrawled the thorn symbol across Rosa's body in her own blood.
Daniel Vasher and his Thorn Syndicate are every bit as ruthless as the man they believe to be the devil's messenger, and are using everything at their disposal to find him, which includes the government's own technology and surveillance, because they believe that once they find him, they will stand victoriously alongside Satan and act as his army, bringing hell on earth.
You know, human beings are an incredibly cruel species. Despite all our technological advancements, the fact that we can comprehend and reason, you know, at our core, we're still really quite savage. I mean, look around. Look at your social media. We are people who thrive on violence. We're fascinated with death. So is it any wonder that we are entranced or enthralled with even the mere idea of someone like Michael Myers, someone who acts on all of his impulses, who satisfies his every bloodthirst? Simply put, he personifies the everlasting darkness that lies within all of us.
The general public becomes fascinated by serial killers because it's just like a crash site. It's the same thing. When you're driving down a highway and you see police lights, you see the fire trucks, you're going to slow down to see this horrible accident. People are fascinated by serial killers because these are things that they don't experience in their daily life. We don't, see murder and mutilations on a daily basis, especially people that commit multiple murders one after another. And it's a frightening situation, but yet I think it's in our human nature to be fascinated by it.
Serial killers have become celebrities in our society. I mean, think about it. Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, these are household names. You hear about them everywhere you go. Movies, books, music, so on. And to me, the main reason why is the sensationalism created by the media. Turn on any news broadcast, what's the top story? Somebody's been murdered or some other act of violence. And why? People can't get enough of it. So really the cycle feeds itself. I mean, there are even people who collect murderabilia, as they call it. Letters written by serial killers, artwork, photos, all kinds of crazy things. Most of these collectors, they're just normal everyday people who see these things as have some sort of historical value. And then you got the other collectors, the ones whose motives are much more convoluted and deranged. They want to get closer to their favorite serial killer. And it can become an obsession.
The case of Michael Myers is basically the same as anyone such as Charles Manson. Charles Manson's face is on t-shirts. He was on the cover of Life magazine. He's probably one of the most popular people in the entire world. Charles Manson, many people know who he is because of the celebrity status he achieved. And the same thing happened with Michael Myers. He became this celebrity serial killer that, his face is on t-shirts, it's in magazines, it's talked about at dinner tables.
Copycat killers often want to experience the same celebrity or infamy as the killers they're trying to imitate. Oftentimes these people, though, cross over from the fanaticism to actually perpetrating crimes, even committing murders, just to feel the power that comes from the fear that they create.
The public does turn to paranoia and panic when a serial killer is operating within their vicinity. Of course, this is all out of fear. The Son of Sam caused panic in New York, and one of the true stories that comes to mind was the Axeman of New Orleans. When he was operating during the 1920s, he had specifically wrote to the press saying, "I want to hear jazz music playing in every household in New Orleans, or I'll commit another murder." Well, everyone was blasting jazz music in their households, and there wasn't a murder that night. So you could see the effects that, these murderers and serial killers and people such as Michael Myers can have on people.
In the case of Tamara Osborne, her motive was not to bask in the glory of Michael Myers' celebrity. She saw what she was doing more as a continuation or a completion of the work that he had started.
Tamara Osborne worked at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. She had lots of friends, she was close to her family, and yet no one knew she was hiding the secret obsession with Michael Myers. After her arrest, police found hundreds of notebooks filled cover to cover with details about Michael and his victims. Her walls were covered with photos and newspaper clippings. She cut out his victims' obituaries and made them into a scrapbook. And once this collection wasn't enough to satisfy her obsession anymore, that's when she turned to murder.
The commonality in all her victims was that they all had survived previous attacks from none other than Michael Myers. The murder she savored the most was the one she was arrested for, that of John Tate, because John Tate was the nephew of Michael Myers and the son of Laurie Strode.
How about you? Did you have a calling?
Yeah, I had a calling. Remember what I was wearing, and where I was at, what color my hair was. Remember exactly how I felt when I got that call.
And how did that feel?
Liberating. Overwhelming. You know, it's like this wave came over me, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. You know, fuck the consequences.
You know, Tamara, you're actually saying a lot without saying anything at all. I want you to help me understand why you did what you did. Why did you kill those people?
Why did I kill those people? You know, fate is stronger than will. You don't meet Michael Myers face to face and expect to live. You know, they're no fucking survivors. Those people were meant to die. You know, they're no heroes. Only villains. Villains are the reason that you pray before you go to bed at night. Villains are the reason that you stand in a straight line. You know? And sometimes people fall out of line. And that's my calling. To show those people who fall out of line the error in their ways.
It's been speculated that Tamara's a part of the Thorn Syndicate and they helped her escape, while others speculate that she's actually public enemy number one to the Thorn Syndicate. By killing in the name of Michael Myers and posing as him, to them that would be considered an act of blasphemy. Unfortunately, we don't have enough information to confirm either theory, and we don't know where she is. Tamara Osborne escaped and vanished off the face of the earth. Daniel Vasher and the Thorn Syndicate are nowhere to be found and seemingly impossible to locate. Michael Myers is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. We don't know anything about the whereabouts of any of these people. The one thing we are sure of, despite our best efforts, it's becoming painfully obvious there's no shortage of monsters roaming the countryside.
Bum 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 bum. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him two lips like roses and clover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Bum 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 bum. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him the word that I'm not a rover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have bring me a dream. Give him a pair of eyes with a come hither gleam. Give him a lonely heart like Pagliacci, and lots of wavy hair like Liberace. Sandman, someone to hold, would be so peachy before I'm too old. Please turn on your magic beam, Mr. Sandman, bring me, please, please bring me, Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
Who's ahead of man? That's some nasty shit, dude. Man, I mean, it's just, it deforms, man. It completely deforms the flesh. That's fucking amazing. That too.